Folks, and welcome to our intermediate video series on core data. In the first series, our introduction, we made this app that allowed us to save and quit our app and then get our data back. So let's just remind you about that. So I can add somebody here. So I'll add Jane Doe. Oh, Jane does. We're going to add that. We can then quit the app by doing Shift-Command-H. I can then do Shift-Command-H twice so that I can remove the app or delete it from the apps that are running, and then I can click here to bring it back. In this set of videos, we want to take the next step and be able to delete some data or edit that data. So what I've done here is just made a little document that explains different ways that we can do that. So how can we delete and edit core data and as managed objects? So there's three ways. The first way is we could store and retrieve and keep track of only NS-managed objects and make no other objects. So when we went in and made our entity, you'll remember that once we make an entity, we have an object. That object could be kept in an array, and we would have direct access to those objects. So anytime I wanted to delete, I would just take the managed object out of the array. Anytime I wanted to edit, I would just update an object in the array. So essentially, I'd have an array of NS-managed objects. The problem with that is it makes it hard to add our own custom behaviors since we are not using our own classes, we're using the NS-managed object classes. So if we look at the pros and cons, number one, it's very easy to work with core data if we store only core data objects. This is a good choice for saving and retrieving simple data with not much functionality. The problem with this method is the app is very tightly tied to core data. In other words, it would be very hard to change the back-end data store. So if we decided to move from core data to something else, we would have a lot of work to do. The other con, of course, is it's very hard to add other functionality. The second solution is we can make our own Swift objects that do everything we need them to do. At the same time, we could make NS-managed objects in core data by building entities. So in this case, I would have my own objects and I would have corresponding managed objects. Okay, in our own objects, we can store a reference to the corresponding managed object. So from my own object, I'll keep a reference to the managed object. So I can do everything I need with my object, but if I need to delete or edit, I have access to my managed object. This way we have full control over our objects and their behavior, and we have easy access to the managed objects. The pros here, you can easily add functionality to your classes and have access to core data at the same time, so you sort of get the best of both worlds here. You can do all the functionality you wish, and you have the corresponding managed objects that do the saving, retrieving, and the editing. The con is, well, we're still somewhat tied to core data because each of our own objects has a reference to a core data object. So it still makes it a little bit tricky to change the back end, but a lot less compared to option number one. Option number three is completely disconnecting from core data. So we would make our own objects like in number two, but never store the actual managed object together with the real object. So I would have real objects and I would have managed objects, but the managed objects are all saved in the database. So anytime I would need to edit or delete anything in core data, I would first need to do a fetch. So if I was going to do a delete, I would have to fetch the manage object and delete it. If I was going to do an edit, I would have to fetch the manage object, then I would edit it, then I would save it back. The pros to this is we are not tied to core data at all, and we can change the backend store anytime we want. The con is we need to do more fetching and more lookups in our core data. For this series of videos, we're going to take the middle road. We're going to add the core data objects to our real objects and do the editing and saving like that. So get ready, because we're going to start the intermediate video series on core data. See you in the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.